So I think what we'll do is, we were just chatting as Yao was moving the camera around, but this one, I think it was in the early 2000s, so it was like 12, 15 years after you did the first one. But it's also a bit of an extreme in terms of the addition, what's layered on top. Yeah. So if you want to sort of explain the background, this is when you were at Bennington as well, still teaching at Bennington.
This one, no, I stopped. This is 2020. I did this one in 2020.
Oh, okay. Well, when did you leave Bennington? I thought it was
2015.
Right.
So I was 5 years out of Bennington. I did this particular painting. This
okay.
We're 2022 now. So this one was 2021. This was 2020.
Okay, gotcha. All right.
But I had a house. We had a place up in Vermont. While we still, but this was like a memory of that place, I think.
Why don't you stand on this side?
Okay. But I had made this painting, sort of as a memory, reminiscing about the backyard. The best thing about, one of the things I liked a lot about Bennington was the backyard. The wildlife was wonderful. That's why this is called Wildlife. And in the wintertime, you'd always see these rabbit tracks in the backyard. And because it was surrounded by a lot of trees, forests, and stuff like that. But the making of this painting, I sort of stopped before I expected to, and left the underpainting showing, left the texture. Mm-hmm. And that was sort of a kind of a radical thing for me to do. I know it's a small thing, but it's...
You had intended it to be more impasto like this.
Kind of, could have, very easily, yeah.
Yeah, no, this is very translucent. It's almost like a thin, like underpainting wash.
Yes, yeah. And it works well for me because the black really actually recedes, which is really interesting because I would have thought usually the black would have read positive, and it reads negative in the painting somehow, spatially. And that's what I liked about it.
Well, part of it is too because it hugs the edges a lot.
The edges.
Yeah, and so it inherently gives it sort of a modeling effect.
I spent a lot of time on the rendering the edges the way they are. And then through digitally, I was able to enlarge them. And make this. So,
and this is the same scale as Blue Cameo that we just looked at.
Yes.
And the rest of them from here on change dramatically in dimensions and scale and size, but these two are the same. I think this one's a little narrower.
Yeah, it's a little.
But the imagery is also quite different. The overlay. But what's nice is you see the ground a little bit more here for viewers to see the sort of the two M's more clearly, one vertical and one horizontal. So the one is the vertical narrow and the other one is more horizontal and sort of spread out. So it's essentially marking out the M below.
So I decided the original intent, go back to the original intent of, I actually, somehow I was able to pretty much, this was taped. This is all done, there was tape. So I could cut around using a knife, a mat knife, and make that, and then I was able to just smear the paint on.
Gotcha.
And I didn't even use a paintbrush. It's not my fingers either. It was actually a palette knife. And it was a very, very sort of free, something I've never done before, and didn't know what to think of it. When I did it, I thought it was really radical. Now it doesn't have that same.
Well, it's because you've done it.
I've lived with it long enough. I was for a long time. What do I think about this? But it takes time to decide, and I think it works really well. So but I wasn't going to, I didn't want to go through the rest of my life making these kinds of marks on the,
right.
you know, on a
Well, I
canvas.
mean, they're organic shapes, and they're very impasto and very painterly for people who can't see them, but there's enough light glare, and I think people, even on this video, can see it. But yeah, they're very different. They actually, in many ways, work in some ways very well with sort of this static, if you will.
Yeah.
This hazing that's going on in the background of the screen print from the photo printing. So you're picking up all those imperfections and dust and you know, unevenness in the light, that all gets captured. And so it works very well, you know, in this case, because it's this nice.
It doesn't.
It's the piece overall around the edges has a sort of a painterly aspect about it because of that sort of hazing and imperfection of the print quality.
Yes.
And so it sort of actually, I think, adapts well to having something, you know, even though it's very eye-jarring initially with the extremes and, you know, the hard edge and the black and then the color. But I think it actually works very well, especially with that orange.
Oh yeah. I think
So it's very dynamic, it's very lush, and you know, it has a very much a warmth about it, even though there's a lot of, you know, black, but there's a lot of warmth, you know, coming from all of that palette.
And I think that the last thing I did varnish it, so that it's got a shiny.
So you said you varnished this, but I'm curious, you mean even the orange, the whole thing?
No.
Oh, okay, just the painted parts.
Just the paint part.
Gotcha.
The rest is flat. But I wanted to really make a contrast between the ground,
Yeah.
and these shapes.
Right.
And so it's you know, it's these don't look like rabbit. This has nothing to do with a rabbit in this color. I mean, that's sort of how rabbits run. If you look at their prints,
Right.
It's very scientific. But this doesn't. It's like a big rabbit.
No.
And very colorful feet. So it's not, it doesn't look at all like, it just becomes an abstraction. And it's,
Yeah.
and that's what happens to me, is that I could sometime come back and almost forget what it was.
Well, I think that's been the very nature of all of your overlays. Your source, you know, you're appropriating from yourself, but your source looks entirely different than when you overlay it and create this hybrid print painting. And that's one reason why I just kind of wanted us to pan through the rest of these, because the imagery is very different. In fact, the one is a mental image because you never painted one for this other painting. But I think what we'll do is move, because here again is a pairing of you really had trimmed this down considerably. So this is a black and white ground or screen print, and then you overlaid this, what was a screen print over here.
Right.
You even scrunched it up. I just now realized for the first time the scale's a little different on the print, it looks like. But here's the print, another one of your prints, and this is a wood block that you had done. But what's interesting about this is you said this came from a home renovation project. This is a bathroom vanity and a mirror.
Exactly. That's exactly right. The faucet would go here, and there would be a hole here.
But I love this one because it's you're just playing with line and color here, but it has lots of depth, and it has this sort of much more optical sort of illusory aspect. Part of it, you also are using more psychedelic colors. Yeah. So purple and bright green, I mean bright yellow, and then this sort of aqua color, and the angles. I mean, so it's a lot of the tricks of the trade in terms of, you know, altering visual perception, you know, with color and vector geometry. But then you turn it really literally on its head over here, turning it up on its side. Now it really looks abstracted, very abstracted, because now it doesn't reference. And this is what I meant by this. You know, when you look at that, when you told me, oh yeah, this was from a home renovation project, I went, oh, it's a sink.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know that. Yeah.
Two cabinet, three cab, four cabinet.
So you didn't tell me what the name of it was, but then when you said that, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I get that.
It's vanity.
And but then when you look at it here in this orientation, you don't pick up on that at all. I mean, this just looks like a pure abstraction, and you were just being sort of funky and weird that this is mostly vertical, and then all of a sudden you went sort of wacky over here. But again, this is even more trippy because you got this fluorescent orange in here, which I think is great against this black. So, and I'm wanting to show this because the last one we're going to get to, I think, is you really, it's the most reductive way I've seen sort of spatial depth portrayed. But I think this is very illustrative of how, you know, in a very reductive, clean way, you've conveyed an object. This is like getting to your now being more object-oriented, but still color and surface. And for some reason, building materials and construction or architecture always seems to come into your work.
Yeah.
And a lot of it seems to come from when you were in California. You did a lot of home painting and projects with people and their obsessions over surface and color and this, that, and the other. And so it sort of made you more attuned to architecture as a vehicle for image making or picture making.
I was always, I've always been really interested in design, industrial design. I mean, I'm not an industrial designer, but I love Eames, Charles Eames products. Mm-hmm. I used to buy them in junk stores. You always had to buy for the whole set. But they all come apart and they fit okay in my car. Yeah. They just could unscrew them and put them on. But, and then suddenly people, it was before that stuff really caught on. It's like all this plastic furniture and stuff. Yeah. But it was not only was it nice to look at, it was very comfortable to sit in. So I like certain design stuff. I had one of my mentors was a woman who was an architectural historian, Esther McCoy, and she knew Eames and his wife, and so I'm sure that I think she had. She was a teacher of mine, had been at the graduate school at UC Santa Barbara, but then and she also was the one that encouraged me to move to LA after graduate school, without a job. And so she found me a job in a warehouse, working with, as an art handler, and everyone in there had an MFA. Driving truck.
Sadly, it's still the same way.
No, it's a good way. It's okay. It's really great, actually. But I did like that. This was something that was, when we renovated our place in New York, we needed something special for the bathroom because the way the door opened, the way the door swung, it had to have clearance, and so there had to be that shape so that the door wouldn't hit it. And so that's how that whole thing happened. But it's something. I've done paintings about chairs. I've done paintings about tables. I've done paintings about windows, doors, just really basic shapes. But I never really think of them by the end of the painting. It's not about depicting a chair or a window or something.
It's a design element.
It's just a design element. Yeah. It's a composition. And so what's wonderful about this particular paint, that shape on top of this kind of a pattern in the background, is really a very funny thing to do, I think. And I didn't want it to go all the way to the edge. I wanted it to almost look like a stamp on there. And I think it really works really well. And I also was curious about day-glow paint and how I think it's oil paint. I mean, it is oil paint, but I've never heard, excuse me, I've never really seen or heard of, there's something fluorescent oil paints, like a new phenomenon. They don't really have it. But there's a company that makes it water-based, but if you add oil to it, it becomes oil paint. It's a weird mix. Holbein makes it.
Oh, okay.
It's very expensive. So I was experimenting with it's very fugitive, so it's not really heavily painted. And so what I had to be very careful not to I had to paint the yellow one first.
Oh, and then painted.
And then paint, yeah, deliberately to as a solid color to make it. If I painted it against that black, it wouldn't be the same. So
sure, yeah.
So that's what's kind of nice about it. Just trying to make a very sort of an upbeat painting.
Yeah, no, it is. It's very vivid.
And it sort of rhymes with, I don't know, a lot of stripy paintings you see at one point, but nobody's done pinstripes like that I've seen. So I was sort of happy to.
Yeah, it was very vibrant, and you echo that when we get around to the corner too. The last one from here, though, that we ought to touch on while we're here, and there isn't a separate side painting for this one.
No.
But this one's called Hedge.
Yes.
And it was just two large sculptures.
It was sort of an oversized sculpture. It was with a hedge for privacy, but the sculpture was much higher than. It was in my own imagination. There was a woman named Lena Hornick who had a place north of New York on the river, and she had a lot of outdoor sculpture. And she had Richard Serra's and Ellsworth Kelly sculptures. They were fabulous. She had a Kelly sculpture that went up, and it was all chrome. I guess it was aluminum. And you look up, it disappeared because it took on the reflections of the sky. So it was just sort of a fascinating optical experience, I think. And so she had she had a Richard Serra sculpture, and she had somebody else. I don't remember who it was. It might have been a de Souvero or something that was. This sort of looks de Souvero-like,
yes, very much
in a way.
Yeah.
But it was, and then it was, but it had some privacy. So and I was thinking about on the Hamptons, all the hedges that are out there.
Yeah.
And we had friends that had rented places like that. And so anyway, it seemed like it was a nice. It relates back to the other geometry, the earlier ones,
yes, the windows.
Like the windows,
yeah.
But using this texture, it looks more more organic, I suppose.
Yeah.
And then I just said, well, why does it have to be two greens? Why not make it one green and one blue? What's the difference? And then I actually put a yellow up here, and then I painted it out. I didn't like it. So I painted it back, and you wouldn't really notice it. I do. I kind of like it white, and just painted white. But that's where it's come to. And again, it's like, especially installed this way. This was so gravity heavy at the bottom,
right,
compositionally. But with it being high up, it's really a terrific installation.
And this was the last painting.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was the last.
I did this last year.
Yeah.